Hi everyone, and welcome to the Research Like a Pro question and answer series. Today's video is called How to Avoid Assumptions, the Bartholomew Ballance Case. And this is an excerpt from our monthly office hours session where I talk about a case I'm working on, the Bartholomew Ballance research, and he disappeared from census records, and so I assumed he had died. And then I found out he hadn't died through research in land and tax records. So this is just showing how sometimes we might make assumptions which shut down our research when we should continue to do reasonably exhaustive research and make sure we've checked all the jurisdictions and all the various record types that might be relevant before we assume somebody passed away, just because we have negative evidence or they're not found on a certain census record or something. So this talks about the 1870 census, the challenges with that enumeration, and tracking Bartholomew Ballance in a burned county in Arkansas with land and tax records. So hopefully this is useful for you and a good chance to think about what assumptions we are all making that are making our research harder for us. This is a question I submitted for myself. Just kidding. It's just an experience I had recently that I thought would be good to talk about. And some of you probably have heard my RLP webinar about Sally Keaton, where I did a big research project with her in the spring to find DNA matches that descend through her children. So I worked on proving each of her children and then the DNA matches that descended from them to show that she's a part of the Keaton family. And so she married William Reeves. So it was the Reeves family. Well, one of the Reeves daughters was Sarah Caroline Reeves Ballance. That's what her name is on Find a Grave. Her headstone says Caroline Ballance, but in the census records, she's Letha Caroline Reeves. I never saw any Sarah. I think that was just a misreading of Letha, Leathe. So, with this daughter and her husband, Bartholomew Ballance, they were buried in the Reeves Cemetery, where Sally Keaton Reeves was also buried. And the headstones didn't say any years of when they were born or died, just their names. So we have Bat Ballance and Caroline Ballance. And in my phase 2 report that I shared in the webinar, I had assumed that because they weren't listed in the 1870 census there in Izard County, that they must have died before 1870. And the headstone actually looked like it was placed in the 1910s. And that should have been a big clue to me, looking at the other headstones of this style and noticing when the death date was for them should have been a clue. And I even put it in my report that the headstone style was from the 1910s. And in my report, here's my erroneous conclusion, where I said Bartholomew and Letha Ballance were not found in the 1870 census in Arkansas. Since they were buried in Izard County at the Reeves Cemetery, it seems they likely died there in Izard County before 1870. And so I hadn't finished the research in Arkansas. I had mostly just done research in Mississippi before they moved to Arkansas. So without checking tax records and any later censuses after 1870, that's the intermediate conclusion I came to. And with all the DNA research that I correlated and stuff, I never found any descendants from them. And none of their census records in 1850 or 1860 showed any signs of them having children. So it was always just them by themselves. So one thing that I have heard, and I did some research on this to find out if it's true, I have heard that the 1870 census had a significant undercount, and that a lot of people, especially in the South, were not counted or not included in the 1870 census. And in the Wikipedia article on this topic, there's some controversy about it. Some people think that the population growth differences between, like the 1870 and 1880 census versus 1880 to 1890 and that kind of thing show that there was a miscount in 1870. And social scientists have said that there were a lot of Black Southerners that were not counted. And so people are kind of unsure about how many people were missed. Some counts say as high as 1 million people were not counted. But I've definitely seen this in my own research that sometimes I just can't find a family in 1870. And I think another problem with 1870 is that we just don't always know where people lived because it was a time of upheaval during the Reconstruction. And so we expect them to be in one place and they're in somewhere else. But this was a case where I just could never find them in 1870. So I thought they died. Well, in my current phase of the Research Like a Pro study group where I looked into the Arkansas records for the Reeves family. I found Bartholomew Ballance in tax records and a deed in 1899. And you should have seen my face when I saw his name on a deed in 1899 because I was racking my brain trying to figure out why a dead man would have a deed. And I finally realized he was alive after I saw him on multiple tax records in the 1880s. So I still haven't found them in 1870. And in 1880, their names were weird. They were listed as, I think, William B. I don't really know if that says William, but something B. And I've always seen him enumerated as either Bartholomew B. Ballance or Bat B. Ballance. I don't know. I think Bat is a nickname for Bartholomew, so I don't know what the other B stands for. I guess it could be Bartholomew Bat Ballance. I don't know for sure. Letha Caroline, her name was listed as Lenore. It's possible this is another wife. I think it's probably the same wife based on the age and where she was born, and just probably errors in the census not being as accurate. But I do think this is them. There were no other balances at all. They didn't have any children, as far as I can see. And there were no other balances on the tax records or anywhere else in the census records in Izard County starting in 1850 all the way to 1900. There was just no one else with Ballance as the last name. So I think this has to be them after correlating it with the tax records I found. I did look at the neighbors, and I did have Bartholomew Ballance's land location because he patented land in 1860 in Izard County. So I knew right where he had his land. And so looking at the first landowner's map from History Geo, I was able to correlate some of the neighbors. So looking above the Ballance couple, we have William H. Moser, J.D. Melton, and I think it's Daniel Copeland. I can't really read that. Samuel Copeland. Then looking at the first landowner's map by Bartholomew Ballance's land, I found some Meltons and Daniel Moser, James Moser, William H. Moser, and a Copeland. And this could have been the son in the census because there was a son named James who was 11 in 1880, who could have been 21 in, or 18, 19, 20 in 1889 when he patented this land. So I figured this was probably the same person because of the neighbors. Then I was able to find Bat B. Ballance in 1886. So that correlated with the fact that he was still alive and didn't die in the 1860s. And the land was the same as the one he patented in 1860. So we have sections 33 and one part in section 34. So you can see here that the land, each little section or plot of land is listed in a separate row. So it's the east part of the southeast, the east half of the southeast part of the section 33 of section 33, township 16 north, range 8 west. And so all of these are in 16 north, 8 west, and added up to 160 acres valued at $160, which is really low. It was really sad to see his land being valued at this low amount in the 1880s. And he didn't. What was interesting is that when I found the deed for him, right before this deed, so he sold his land in 1899, probably because he was getting old. I'm not sure. And I think he died after this. I didn't find him in 1900. Maybe he moved in with relatives. I'm not sure. But right before this, there were 3 patents from the government to Bartholomew Ballance. And I wonder if those were included as chain of title before this deed, because it said in the first landowners that he patented this in 1860. So I'm not sure. Maybe someone here knows why they would have this in the county deed books. Izard County had their courthouse burned and everything was lost in the 1880s. So they might have just been re-recording the patents. I'm not sure. But then he sold his land, and this is the last record I have of him. So the takeaway from this experience is if you haven't had a chance to finish the research on a person, don't assume they died, even if you couldn't find them in a census record. And I did put it in my future research section to look into tax records in this area and stuff. So I'm glad I did. Sadly, there weren't tax records for every single year. There were none of the 1870s had tax records online, so maybe they have them somewhere else, but the state level did have the ones before the county burned. So they had 1860s and 1887 through 1891, which was nice because we don't have the 1890 census. So are there any comments? Does anyone know why those patents would be recorded right before this deed?
I have seen that before where they put those in the county deed books. And who knows what the reason is.
I just
But
figured it was for tracking the chain of title.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, but I've definitely seen it before. There's a question, does that mark mean the land was sold for 50 cents or just 50 cents?
no, that's usually the cost to record it. So I think the amount
Yeah,
that he paid was listed in here. I can't remember.
nice. Nice. And I did look up, I don't know if you looked up the 1870 census in the Dollarhide book on the census,
Mm-hmm.
but I was reading his justification of saying that they lost like 1.2 million. And there are a couple of interesting sources. One is a federal law or an act or something. Remember in 1870, they were having the federal marshals do the census.
Yeah.
And, it was just such a bad enumeration that they got rid of that and started a new way of doing it.
I read in the Wikipedia article that they ordered some areas to be redone in the winter. And
Interesting.
so like in the north, they
Yeah.
had suspicions that they didn't count everyone
Hmm.
even. So,
Yep. There was really low pay for the assistants in the South, and they didn't want to, just the whole thing with the South, the North versus the South in the 1870 census was still going on.
right.
Uh,
I did find the consideration for this deed. It was in consideration of the sum of $300. So that's how much he sold his land for. So it was better than 160, which it was valued at in 1886. At least it
Yeah.
went up a little bit. Oh, another thing that was fun was this deed had a witness of D. Blevins, and in the 1880 census, one of the neighbors to the Balances was Diedrich Blevins. And I noticed Diedrich named one of his sons Bartholomew. So I thought, oh, maybe this is a friend who named his son after Bartholomew Ballance. Interestingly, Bartholomew Ballance must have been really nice or really revered because a lot of the Reeves family named their sons Bartholomew Ballance Reeves or Bartholomew Ballance Martin. So even though he had no children, he has a lot of namesakes.
Oh, that's neat. That's such a unique name, too.
Yeah.
Makes it really easy to track families with such a unique name being
Yeah,
passed
and
down.
this was fun to do because they had no descendants. So a core like a what do you call me? A relative that's not a direct descendant.
Collateral.
Collateral. I was gonna say corollary. A collateral descendant is probably the closest genealogist they're gonna have to help find them. So
Hmm.
I'm glad I
That's
could
true.
discover some more of these records about them, even though it was in Izard County, which is very difficult.
That's so neat.